welcome to Miniature Fairy Tales. My name is Carissa and I'm coming at you today from Townsville in Queensland, Australia. Today I want to share a video with you on how to build a miniature coach. This is my own design in approximately 1/24 scale. It's really not a tutorial. I don't include measurements, and that's because I've pretty much done everything by eye based on one object that I make. So there should still be enough information for you to make your own if you would like to. And if you do, I'd love it if you would share it with me. I also have a Facebook page if you're interested. It's called Miniature Fairy Tales. We'd love for you to come and join us there if you would like to. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy today's video. To start off, I created these circles in Design Space, which is a program for the Cricut Explore Air 2. What I'm doing right now is just cutting out the parts with my craft knife that didn't cut out correctly on the machine. So I've got 12 of these, and the idea is to layer 3 of them together to make one piece, and that will give us 4 pieces. So I take each of my 3 pieces and I glue them together accordingly, being very careful to match up the edges so that I don't have anything overlaying or sticking out that shouldn't be. And then once I've done that with each of the 3 pieces, I then have 4 layered pieces to work with, and that gives me a bit more thickness and a bit more stability. Now taking the first 2 pieces, I'm using those slits that I left in the sides of these circles to allow me to connect them together, and they will be glued in place. Now I take the other 2 circles and I put the slits on opposite sides, and that allows me to find the center point, and I'm also using my cutting mat to measure that up. Use my cutting knife and I cut them in half. And so I'll be using each of these halves that I have cut to make up the rest of the circular object that I'm building. So I'm laying down some baking paper, and this is just so that when I'm gluing things won't stick to my mat, because super glue and the like cannot stick to baking paper. I've set up my piece and I'm just using a little bit of polymer clay there to sit the piece into, just to help me hold it while I do the gluing. And as I have one side now glued, I'm adding some more tacky glue to the piece. I'm going to use a toothpick and just spread that around the other edges to assist me in adding the other half pieces in. I'm also adding just a couple of drops of super glue here to provide some stability to the project just while that tacky glue is drying. And now that I have a bit more stability, I can add in those half circles in between the full circles, and this is helping me to create a circular shape which will form like a template for the rest of the project. Now that I'm finished with that template, I'm going to move on to the base of the project. I am using these half-size skewers, also known as cocktail sticks, and these are going to be the axles that hold the wheels. And so at the moment I am just trying to measure out how long I'll need these to be. So I use it based on the template of how wide that is, and that little saucer that it's sitting in makes a pretty good little measuring tool for me because it's roughly around the same size. So I use that to make my first marking and then I mark the next one based off the first one. And also just a small tip about when you're cutting an object based on another object, always put the smaller object in the front and aim your blade down beside the edge of the shorter object, and this will ensure that it is pushed up flush and your measurement will be correct. This is a pack of mixed sequins that I picked up from Officeworks. I am looking for the middle part of the wheel. I'm looking for what I will join my spokes to. Now, as you can see, there's a piece of wire there that I'm using as my circle. The other thing I'd like to point out at this time is, if you can hear snoring in the background, that's my dog, Molly. She is very, very loud, and I apologize. There's no way I could edit this video and record what I need to tell you without her right beside me. So I hope she doesn't interrupt us too much. And it looks like I've found my 4, and these will fit on the inside and the outside of my wheels. Just widening those holes with either a part of a skewer or a toothpick, as long as it's as wide as the skewer and it will lengthen out that hole. You want to make sure that that can get onto the skewer before you do any painting or gluing or anything like that. Make sure that the skewer will go through comfortably and be able to hold onto your wheel. So here you'll see that I'm using some cotton tips, and I use these quite a bit in my miniature making. I just find them very versatile for a lot of small things, particularly in 1/24 scale. So today I'm going to use these as the spokes for my wheels. See, I'm using the lines on my cutting mat to measure out where the middle of the stick is. You can see that I'm putting those pieces of Q-tip into those little rivets, and I'm not really sure if you can see that on the film, but they're little rivets and they are perfect just for holding that dot of glue. I like to use a mixture of super glue and tacky glue. You actually find that this changes the composition of the glue, makes everything a bit thicker and makes things stick down more immediate. You do have to be careful with this technique though, because it will show. So it will show clouding or it will stay white. In this instance though, it's okay to do this because the glue's hidden behind that flower there, so I feel fairly confident with using this technique. Just got to make sure that the whole of the flower is not blocked. Otherwise, you run the risk of not being able to get your skewer through later. I'm now ready to make the rim of the wheels, so I'm using some cardstock here and I'm eyeballing it based on the width of the Q-tip sticks. I'm going to cut out some lengths here, and then I'm going to wrap those around the spokes that I have, make it nice and flush, and then I'll be ready for some adhesive. Here you can see I'm using black paint on the template that we made, and I'm attempting to use it as a stamp to give me some kind of a template that I can use to cut out my cardstock and use that as the basis for the cabin of the coach. Now, I got to admit this was a bit dodgy. It did not give me a really good stamp, so I kind of had to go with it and add in the missing parts, but it did give me enough of a basis to have something to work off, if that makes sense. So I basically drew in the missing parts, and then I cut out what would make a template. I'm tracing around that template, and I will cut out those shapes, and that is going to make the basis of what our cabin will be made of. Look at those nails, Carissa. We certainly won't be winning any beauty competitions today, that's for sure. Luckily we're in isolation right now, but I hadn't really banked on making a video for YouTube. So I decided to draw where my door and my windows were going to go in context with the actual shape, so that I could make it look quite realistic when I cut it out, and that I wouldn't have the shape in the wrong place. So I just wrapped it around the framework, and then I just roughly sketched what I thought the doorway should look like, and I did the same for the windows. So once I had finished with the windows and the door, I then married up everything onto some fabric ready for gluing, and you'll see that the fabric is right side down, and the idea is to glue the pieces onto the fabric and then cut them out. And you'll see I'm using a special fabric glue here. It's mainly so that the glue does not show through to the other side. Whilst I'm waiting my fabric to dry, I'm just popping some tacky glue onto the ends of the spokes for my wheels and gluing them in the inside of the rims, and then we'll pop them aside to dry and we'll carry on with the fabric. Now that my fabric pieces are dry, time to take out my knife and just cut out my windows and my door and my door window. Now you'll see here that I have taken the shape of one window and I have put it over the drawing of the other window. The reason I've done this is to ensure symmetry between my windows. I'm also frequently checking the back of the piece just to ensure that everything's looking good. now we're back into it with the rest of the shapes, just cutting them out of the fabric, taking care with these ones that have been cut out in the middle because they're obviously a lot weaker than the other ones. Now, if you're wondering about my fabrics, I actually got these from a dear friend of mine who, she was doing a project with her daughter, and she went to an old curtain shop and asked if she could take their old samples that they no longer used, and they said yes, of course you can. So she brought them home, and she didn't end up using all of them, so she offered them to me because she knew that I was into crafting. And yeah, it's a really great way to obtain some fabric for free. If you have an old curtain place, pop on in there and see if you can pick yourself up some good fabrics. So as you can see now, I am gluing the bare side of the shapes down to the back side of this purple fabric. Time to paint the axle and the wheels. So again, in with the alcohol ink, because I love working with it so much and I love the shine that it gives everything. You can paint almost anything with this stuff, so it's very versatile, but again, you do have to work very quickly with it, and it's pretty hard on your brushes. And my goodness, my dog is giving me a run for my money on the audio today. I'm really sorry, guys. My double-sided fabric card pieces are now dry, and what you'll see me doing here is I'm just shaping them to allow them to fit better together in a curve. If you pre-curve them, they are much easier to glue. So I am using the same colour as what is on the inside of the shapes to form little ribbons, and these are going to help with stability in putting these shapes together, because if we try and glue edge to edge, it's not going to offer us enough stability. So these ribbons will go down the edge of each shape, and they will be used as a connection point. They offer flexibility as well, because not all of the edges are going to fit flush, so this is going to help ensure that everything will stay together. you'll see here I'm using a tiny clothes peg to keep one end together. I've glued one half of the ribbon and I am just joining up these two shell-like pieces together to form part of the curve. You can see there I'm using my nail to spread it round. There's plenty of glue in there, and I'm making sure that the fabric is sticking down on both edges of the pieces. So I did that with all of them, and then once I had doubles, it was time to join them up with other doubles. It dries into a football shape when you put it all together, and the top and bottom actually have to be squished down in order for it to become a bulb shape. Look, it is a little bit fiddly, but it's definitely possible. Just persevere with it and you will get there. And through the magic of video, we can skip right ahead to when things are together, and I'm working very, very quickly to try and get the edges stuck down and make sure that it doesn't come apart. And here's how we're looking on the inside. You can see the ribbons. And here we now have all of our pieces stuck together. We did need to use some super glue to just ensure that everything did stay well stuck, but it's given it extra stability and it's turned out really nicely. So now we're bringing the wheels back in just to have a look at size, have a look at where exactly the coach will sit. So now we're going to have a look at how we can finish the cabin. So I've decided to take the leftover fabric that I had from the outside of the coach cabin, and I'm going to cut some strips out of this and use them to finish off those edges so that everything looks nice and neat and tidy. So here I've taken a strip of that fabric and I have run a strip of glue down the edges of two of the pieces, and basically just running that piece of fabric over the top to finish things off. I apologise, I'm out of frame a lot in this part of the video, but you get the idea of what I'm doing. To finish off the top and bottom of the dome, just to cover up the edges of the ribbon fabric. So I'm using some tacky glue here and just a couple of bead ends that I picked up from Spotlight. Now you might have noticed through the video that the template ended up being painted gold. We no longer have any use for this template now, so I've actually dismantled it and I am using some of those half pieces to form the base of the carriage, and the cabin's going to sit down into this. So this, because it was glued together so well, it's come apart a little bit, and it will need some mending in order to put that together. So I'll go ahead and I'll do that, and then we can move along with the base of the carriage. You'll see here that I've picked up one of those circles that I cut out earlier, and I'm just going to cut that one in half, and they will be painted gold and used as little bench seats inside the coach. And back into that bag of sequins again, I've decided that I want to stick something into the floor of the cabin just to cover up the unfinished ends in there. So I've picked this nice sparkly one. I'm just going to pop some glue on there and pop that right into the floor, and it actually gives a bit of a disco effect, which I think is pretty cool. Now at this point I've got my stick out, and I'm just measuring up to see where the stick's going to sit on the base and where my wheels need to come to. And through the magic of video, here are the smaller wheels that I've made. You can see they're exactly the same. I've just cut those spokes a little bit shorter. So now that I have the smaller wheels, I'll wrap them and get them painted up. Now we are moving right along to make the driver's seat and the bench where his legs rest. I'm making this out of a piece of card. So I'm using my ruler here just to bend the base into shape to where I'll need that to join up with the base of the carriage, and you'll see I'm just using the end of my owl to curve up that end, because I know that with these footrests back in the day they were curved up so that the driver could rest their feet there, and also it was used as a brace for the driver to hold himself in place. So I've curved that up, and I'm just making sure that it's all going to sit right. I know the driver needs to sit higher than what the people inside the carriage do, so I'm kind of using my windows as a guide to help me. So now we're just having a quick look at how things fit together, and we're very pleased with our work, so we give ourselves a little clap, and just making sure that everything is fitting the way we want it to before we move on to the next step. I am making a foot stand for the footman at the back of the coach, so I'm just trying to measure that out and figure out how that's going to sit. And once I have that, it's time to make the seat for the driver. Now that I have the footrest in place, I can make the seat area and measure it to make sure it looks good, measure it to make sure that it looks like it fits okay, and then I'll be able to make some cuts to bring out the legs and then I'll be able to make a cushion for the seat. Here we are at the seat cushion. So I've just cut out a piece of matching fabric, just a very small piece. I'm cutting the corners out of that fabric. I think I actually used the piece off the door, to be honest, so it's got a slight curve on one end. So I'm cutting out the corners and I'm going to fold those edges over and glue them down, and that's going to form our little cushion. Now I could have upholstered this, but because it's a very small piece I decided not to on this occasion, but upholstering it might have made it stick out a little bit more. That, or I could have double layered the card, but in this instance I've just used a single layer. So I've decided I'm going to go with black on these ones, and that looks like a Sharpie, but it's actually a paint pen. So I'm just doing the base in black paint pen, and then I'll go over it with a paintbrush later. Doing it in pen first just gives it a nice base so that your paint brush marks don't show up as much. Back to our wire piece that we had. I'm just straightening that out now, and I've got my bending pliers there, and I'm just putting some curves into the end. And here I am just cutting some smaller pieces of wire to make some smaller decorative parts for the coach. I haven't set out with something in mind. I'm just kind of cutting smaller pieces because I know that there'll be smaller decorative parts, but I don't know exactly what they're going to be yet. I'm just going to use my bending pliers, bend them into some shapes until I get something I like, and then I'll decide what they're going to be. Now at this stage, I think I have figured out that I want to make handrails for the footmen, but I do want them to be especially decorative because, especially in the case of Cinderella or back in those days, things were extremely decorative, and particularly for a pumpkin coach. So I'm going to bend some more wire, and what I'm going to do is put the pieces of wire together in a certain way until I like them. I'll glue them, and then they will become the handrails for the footmen. So I figured out a little design that I like, and I'm gluing that down on the rest-proof paper just so the glue doesn't stick to anything but the metal. So I'm just positioning my little parts and gluing them. I like to leave them just for a little short while and then try and move them ever so gently, and it's just that sometimes the glue will take and sometimes it doesn't, so you just kind of have to maneuver them around until they're touching in the right spots, until the glue sets just enough to hold on to them, and then they're safe to pick up. But you'll see here the second one I touch is not quite safe yet, so it's very important to give them enough time and just maneuver them around a little bit, just to allow them to set. So at this point I have cut some more wire, and I'm just bending that now with my pliers. I'm making a top part to match about the width of that ring at the base, and that's just going to form the top of the stairs to get in and out of the coach. So I will bend 2 pieces of wire in the same way, and then once I'm happy with how they'll sit on that base, then I'll just manipulate the rest of the wire into steps, and I'll cut out some card to use as the actual stairs on top of the stair frame. Once my wire's bent, I will then sit it on the base, and you'll see that I use my owl to prop up the bottom just to hold it in place so that I can glue it without it moving into the spot that I want to. And also using a couple of drops of super glue with my tacky glue here, because I want a quick fix and I want to make sure that these are going to stay in place. So I've cut up my steps and I'm using this gold paint pen, and I'm just going to colour them in. And now I'm just popping some tacky glue onto that base and gluing it to the front wheels, and that's our base completed. And now that I'm happy with how the base looks, I'm gluing on the footrest for the driver in the front. And doing the same for the footman stand on the back of the coach. And I'm into some more wire bending now. I'm just going to make some decorative pieces for the driver's seat. just under his seat actually. I want to make some nice curvatures for under there, so I'm cutting some shorter pieces and doing the same as I did before, just bending them into some shapes that I like, and then I'll put them together with the seat and see what design I like the best. So I managed to make some S bends here, and I'm just now marrying them up with the front of the seat. I'm going to glue them in place into a little pattern that I like. I'm just using some super glue and taking it nice and slow because I want it to be symmetrical. So I'm just gluing in one piece at a time and making sure that they're right before I move forward. I then decided that the foot stand for the footman was a bit bland, and I felt like it needed gold trim on it, so I'm using my gold pen here. If I had thought about this earlier, I would have used my ruler and made straighter lines, but because this was an afterthought, we're just doing it by freehand here. It actually turned out alright. And it just adds a little bit of extra to that back part. And now at this point I am gluing the seat for the driver and popping that into position. I'm really pleased with how the wire trims turned out and the lovely purple cushion on the top. I think it's really made the effect that I wanted for this piece. So putting that into place here, and also adding on those handles onto the back for the footman. I've also made a small wire curvature decorative piece for the front, and so I'm just gluing that into place now. I have to have a very steady hand with this piece and just hold it in place long enough for the tacky glue to get tacky enough to hold it there. So a little bit of patience required here, but it did work out okay. Now I've decided that I want to make some lanterns for the coach. So as you can see, I'm just using some very small gold beading with this little trumpet looking bead. It's silver at the moment, but I do discover that I can actually make a pretty good lamp out of that. So we're going to paint that gold, and we're going to make that fit in with the rest of the design. Again, it's just another bead end. I think that one's from Spotlight. And you can see I've just changed my camera angle. Please do excuse the pile of books and the mirror in the background. We've used a little bit of ingenuity around here to do our camera work. So you'll see that I have glued the lamp on beside the doorway. This one's going to end up going right between our two footmen at the back. Now attaching my door, I'm going to line it up first, glue it, and then go in for the actual sticking. I do this a couple of times just to make sure it's going to be right before I stick it there permanently. and I use super glue with this one just because I want it to stick instantly. So now I am just adding a little bit of glitz and glam to the coach. I've chosen this crown sequin from the bag of sequins that I have, and I also want to finish up around the windows and the door. So we've got our coach nice and blinged up now. And with these extra metal pieces, I've decided to make lamp holders which will stretch from the axle and up the side of the driver's footrest, and will be held on with a little bit of super glue. And then all that will be left for me to do is glue the cabin of the coach down to the base, and we'll be all done. Now this is a classic example of overgluing, but in this instance I'm not really sure where the coach is going to rest on the base, so I'm covering all my options and overgluing where possible. I can clean this up later, but it's just kind of a safeguard so that I make sure I capture everything. That brings me to the end of our video. I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've loved making this for you. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more videos that I make. If you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified the next time I upload. Until next time, do take care. Bye for now.